Well, I'd love to start with I read something fun about the fact that you had a segue while you were directing. How did that come about when you were over in China?
Well, I was, I got the segue from this camera department and camera rental house in Beijing, and they had this like mini hoverboard Segway thing, and as we were checking out equipment and things like that, cameras, we were looking at cameras and lenses, they taught me how to use it, and I had so much fun with it that they said, well, if you want, we'll just throw it into the package, we'll just include it, and we'll ship it, when we send it over. So, that's what happened. They sent it over, and I had it the entire time on set, and I just loved it because it was so easy to, instead of, sometimes you don't go very far, you just push locations, and instead of having to get into the van, I would just get on the Segway and I would just be right there. Or sometimes the actors would be a little far away and I would be at Video Village and I'd have to go back and forth. So yeah, it made for a very convenient commute on set.
You brought up camera packages. You guys used the Aria Mini, the Alexa Mini.
Yes.
What was it like working with that and working with your DP, Anna, about, I know you wanted to coverage the whole family, not just like one person in particular. Can you talk about the shot choices?
Yeah, so Anna and I talked a lot about, whether we were going to shoot a wide aspect ratio or, and if we were going to shoot, therefore, anamorphic or spherical. And she always shoots on the Mini, the Alexa Mini. It's her camera of choice. So it was really just a question of the lenses. And we ultimately decided to go spherical because anamorphic will cause some distortions on the edges. And because we were shooting so many faces, we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to deal with that kind of distortion. And we shot on a wider aspect ratio because those aspect ratios are traditionally used for outdoor landscapes, but we really wanted to capture the landscape of a family. We wanted to be able to put, as you said, all of the faces in frame and still be close to them. And it also helps that when you then remove all of those family members and you're left with just Billy or Nai, then you really feel their isolation when you have one character on this very wide screen. So yeah, that was one of the reasons. I mean, that was the main reason I think that we chose the lenses that we did and the aspect ratio.
When you had the story for This American Life, did you already have it in script form because you like the story, I mean, it's your family story, or did you have to change it later on when it became a hit and Chris, I think, noticed it or listened to it? When did the script version come from that, I guess?
Well, I had written, like a couple drafts of the script early on before I did This American Life, but I think This American Life really helped to give me a new direction in how to take the script, because doing This American Life was a very pure process. It came from a place of investigation and curiosity, as opposed to trying to figure out the marketplace and trying to stick this story into a sort of formula. And so after doing This American Life, I went back to the script and just really stripped it down to the things that I loved about the story and why I wanted to tell the story in the first place. And none of those moments were like big plot points. They were just all these sort of atmospheric or tonal moments, like moments of both like, comedy and grief at the same time. And so once I stripped it down, I was able to kind of go, well, how do I kind of connect? What's the connecting tissue for me to tie all of these scenes together?
Can you talk about the comedy? I loved how smooth you went into the jokes and the wedding sequence on its own is something magical, but like when the dinner scene where he's telling the joke that they've heard it all the time, and then he's like, haven't you told this joke before? I love the comedy that we get in this. It's not apparent in This American Life, but it's so much a part of this movie.
Yeah, I really wanted to capture the joy and humor of this family because I think it says a lot about them as people and their perspective on life, right? You know, so much of the film is about keeping this lie so that Nai is not taken down by the fear, you know, by depression, by like all of this negativity. And so it was, you know, it's a family that very much focuses on joy even in the hardest of times. And I also, you know, that joke specifically that Dad tells in English at the dinner table, it was important for me to have that in because we so rarely get to see an Asian American, you know, who is so fluid in American culture and very assimilated and is funny and tells jokes, especially like, you know, a dad, right? Like he's just your typical dad, like any other dad. And so it was important for me to show that as well.
Mr. Ma is such a well-known actor, not only on TV and movies, but on stage here in America. What's it like when he came on board, and did your dad enjoy watching him play him? I mean, that must have been kind of surreal.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for him because, you know, they're very different people. And, but yeah, my dad really, you know, thought that everyone did a great job. And my mom felt that as well. And they're the harshest critics, you know. It was great. Ty came on board pretty early. He was the second person I cast after Awkwafina. And I always knew I wanted him because he has such a familiar face, and so there's a warmth to that where people a recognizability that's very warm for audiences to see him as the every dad, you know. And I also think Ty is just his comedy is so dry. Like even his sad face is funny, and to me he reminds me of like an Asian Bill Murray.
I've got to ask. What made you go with Awkwafina's name being Billy? Is there any significance in that, or not just, you know, your name, perhaps?
Yeah, I didn't want Billy to be me, so it wasn't me. She wasn't playing, you know, a version of me, like where she had to imitate my voice or my way of talking or, you know, walking, my behaviors. I think that would have been just too strange and it would have felt like a weird imitation. Instead, I wanted to create a conduit, a character that was a vessel for the audience to go on this journey with Billy. And I wanted, you know, Awkwafina to bring her own experiences and put it into this character. So for me, it was never a question that it was going to be a different character with a different name. I chose Billy because I don't know, I guess because it's short, and really the main reason is because the Chinese family can say it. You know, like it had to be a name that sounded the same in English and Chinese, and there's certain syllables that are difficult to pronounce in Chinese, and I think it would have been confusing for the audience if in Chinese they were saying it but it sounded different.
I love the wedding scene. It's so powerful. The drinking game especially. When you guys decided to do kind of each individual face, tell me about shooting that, because that was brilliant. It was one of the best parts of the whole movie.
In the drinking game?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, the last time before the drinking game that we saw all of their faces was at the first dinner where we're meeting them, right? And so in a way, it's this reference to that. Like, you know, we got to meet these characters, and then we went on this crazy journey with them, and then now we're seeing them isolated in the frame again, but you feel like you know them so much better. You know each of their personalities. You know a little bit about their backstories, or at least their emotional backstories, you know? Like Uncle, you know that the emotional journey he's been on, especially. And so I just think it's a really warm moment where, you know, putting the camera in the center of the table, you know, the audience, we feel part of this family, you know, and we see each of them and we recognize that this might be the last time that we're at this table with all of them in such a joyous way.
I know you've got other projects that you'd like to do after this, but this being so connected to you and so unique, especially the ending, knowing the truth behind it after all these years, this must have been kind of cathartic to just do this whole process.
Yeah, it was a really cathartic movie for me to make because I think that I fought harder on this film than I ever have, and hopefully not that I ever will. I like to think that I'll continue to tell stories and fight for the things that I believe in. But because this one was so personal, I fought extra hard to make sure that everybody and everything in the movie was properly represented, and so. Yeah, and so I think it was a sort of evidence, a sort of validation for me that it was worth it to fight for those things, and that we need storytellers who are fighting for these authentic details and textures.
Ms. Wang, thank you for making this movie. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much.